Order, order. We start with questions to the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. Deirdre Costigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I will answer questions 1 and 12 together. Increasing employment and helping people into good work is essential to growing our economy. That's why our Get Britain Working Plan sets out our vision to reform job centres, building a new jobs and careers service that meets the different needs of local labour markets, people and businesses.
Costigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Friday, I visited the assessment centre at West Ealing Job Centre, where staff told me the assessments focus on proving disabled people can't work, rather than identifying what jobs they could do if they had the right support. There are many disabled people in my constituency of Ealing Southall who are eager for a good job. So what more does the Minister think job centres and her department can do to help disabled people into work, rather than simply writing them off?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend for her question, and I'd like to thank her further for meeting DWP colleagues in West Ealing, and through her thank them for all the work that they are doing, and I know she will have been impressed with them, as I always am. Disabled people have a right to work like everyone else, and our job is to see that right realised. Doing so will benefit everyone, as we all win when people's talents and the potential is maximised. That's good for business and it helps strengthen our economy. So we're doing great things to bring forward our plan for a new jobs and career service that will put disabled people at the heart of it.
Pritchard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently visited 2 job centres, Thorn and Scunthorpe, in my area, and saw the great work being done by the staff there. Our job centres should be places that everyone can go to help them back into work. However, many blind and visually impaired people need technology, such as screen readers, to use computers, while others might need software, such as specialist screen magnification software. Centre research has found that no job centres have this specialist assistive technology, meaning some disabled job seekers cannot use the computers on site to look for work. Can the Minister tell us more about how the Government will make sure that job centres are equipped with essential pieces of assistive technology in the future, enabling more disabled people to look for work?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do apologise for my honourable friend. I couldn't quite hear which job centres it was that he has visited. But again, I do thank him for doing so and connecting with DWP colleagues in that way. It's really valuable, and ask him to take all of our thanks back to them. As part of the new Jobs and Careers Service, we will radically enhance our use of technology so that people can access support through the channels that best meet their needs. Assistive technology can aid the accessibility and inclusiveness of the new service that we're building. So we are listening to those who already use it. And Mr. Speaker, briefly on the 22nd of January, I and the Minister for Disabled People met with colleagues from across Parliament as part of the all-party parliamentary group for eye health and visual impairment, where we had the great opportunity to listen to experts in this field.
Bedford. Does the Minister agree with me that whatever steps her department is taking to get people into work is being immediately undermined by the anti-growth, anti-jobs, anti-business measures included in the Government's Employment Rights Bill?
It must be telling.
I do not, Mr. Speaker.
Easton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Secretary of State join me in commending the dedication and hard work of our work coaches who assist with job applications and interview preparations?
Minister.
On that one, I certainly will, Mr. Speaker. Our work coaches are absolutely brilliant, and they are leading the way in changing job centres.
Duncan-Jordan.
Question number 2, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In recent months, the Department has run the biggest ever pension credit take-up campaign across TV, radio and online. 150,000 pension credit claims were made in the 16 weeks following the winter fuel payment announcement, and this campaign continues. This week, new work to invite all pensioners newly receiving housing benefit to claim pension credit will begin.
Duncan-Jordan.
I thank the Minister for his statement. The latest figures show that at least 800,000 pensioners are eligible for pension credit but do not claim it. This means they have now also lost out on the winter fuel payment that they previously would have enjoyed. Does the Minister think that means testing is working?
Minister.
It is important that 1.5 million pensioners will receive the winter fuel payments this winter. The statistics the honourable friend refers to relate to previous years before the recent campaign on take-up has taken place. But he is right to highlight that under the Conservative government, 3 in 10 eligible pensioners were missing out.
Tom-Gordon.
In recent days and weeks, we've seen household bills for constituents across my constituency go up and up and up. Many who miss out on pension credit because they're just above the cut-off will now be wondering where they're going to find that extra money. So will the government think again about removal of the winter fuel payments and make sure that pension credit's rolled out to people on a taper?
Minister.
Well, it is important we keep driving up the take-up of pension credit, but that's not the only support available to pensioners. That's why everyone will see the state pension rise by over 4% this April. It's why the Household Support Fund is very important, will be extended for another year, and it's why the Warm Home discount is available to the poorest pensioners.
Maskell.
Mr Speaker, government figures show that additional 42,500 people claim pension credit, and yet we know this is only just about 5% of all of those eligible who are not claiming it. And as constituency MPs, we are having to support people who are really struggling with the cold and with their financial balances. Would he think about setting up a pensioner poverty task force so we really can get underneath the issues which are facing older people?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. All members on both sides of this House, I'm sure, are providing support to their constituents, both pensioners and those of working age, and for children, to make sure that they can cope with what has been a difficult few years for everyone because of the cost of living crisis we face. And it is important on pensioner poverty specifically that we do update our understanding of how that has developed, because if we look at the record, what we see is that pensioner poverty halved under the last Labour government, but it rose by 300,000 under the Tory government for the last 14 years.
Gideon Amos.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. While those on the guaranteed element of pension credit receive Warm Homes discount, many do not. And following the changes made a couple of years ago, has the government, to relate Warm Homes discount to the age and size of property, has the government done any assessment of how many people have been affected by the double whammy of losing losing the Warm Homes discount as well as losing the winter fuel payment?
Minister.
I've heard the comment he's made, and I'll raise that with the responsible minister in the Department for Energy, but it is important that all pensioners who are entitled to support get it, and that's what this government is focused on.
Andrew Stone.
Question number 3, please, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Thanks to the dreadful inheritance that the Tory government left us, we need to raise productivity, reduce economic inactivity, increase employment rates and drive up economic growth. Our Get Britain Working plan sets out how we will progress on our ambition of an 80% employment rate, which would then place the United Kingdom amongst the highest performing countries in the world.
Andrew Stone.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. There were some lovely worded statements within that, but the government appears to be doing absolutely the opposite. Following the budget, it appears that there isn't a week that goes by without another employer announcing significant job cuts. And Reed Recruitment themselves have already announced that job postings are plummeting. So what is the government going to do to be able to support her department with the situation they will find themselves in, where they have a rapidly increasing number of people looking for jobs and a rapidly decreasing number of jobs being posted because of their policies?
Well, Mr Speaker, I'm glad that he's bothered by the employment rate, and I hope that he is bothered by the record of his party that saw employment fall off a cliff after the pandemic and never recover. We were absolute outliers in that. Didn't happen anywhere else in the world. As it is, our job centres, which, as we've said, are full of brilliant staff, see just 1 in 6 employers really ever consider using them to recruit. We will change that. We have a new strategy, and Secretary of State recently announced our plan to make sure that the Department for Work and Pensions serves businesses, and we get the best jobs into job centres so that people can take them up and improve their life and grow our economy.
Question number 4, please, Mr Speaker.
Stay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome my honourable friend, the member for Swansea West, to his post as Minister for Pensions, and to place on record my personal thanks to his predecessor for all her hard work. Mr Speaker, our new fraud bill will update the Department's powers to tackle fraud for the first time in more than 14 years, including enabling our serious and organised crime investigators the ability to apply for a warrant, to enter and search premises for evidence, seize items like computers and phones, and bring these criminal gangs to justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that tackling fraud against the taxpayer is key to setting the country's finances on a sustainable footing and enabling investment in public services that my constituents in North Durham are so desperate to see?
State.
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend. We have a responsibility and duty to use every possible measure to ensure taxpayers' money is wisely spent on our schools, hospital and police, and on supporting those who are in genuine need. Our new fraud bill, along with other fraud measures in the budget, will save £8.6 billion over the next 5 years, the biggest fraud package ever. We were elected on a mandate for change, and that is what this government will deliver.
Jim Shell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for that response? Minister, in the press today, there was an indication of some criminal gang that defrauded our DWP by some almost over £1 million. They were able to abscond to a certain former East European country, without naming too many things that's happening. Is there specifically within the law that we have in this land so we can chase those people up, get them back here and find out where that misappropriated money has all got to?
The honourable gentleman is absolutely right to raise this despicable case. We will ensure that we use these new powers in the bill, which we haven't had those powers updated for 14 years. This will bring us in line with other public bodies to make sure we can properly investigate, get the evidence and get our money back.
Max Wilkinson.
Question number 5, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, we are fully committed to supporting vulnerable people into work. It's good for them, provides firms with great workers, reduces the benefits bill, boosts economic growth. Connect to Work, to be rolled out this year, will greatly improve support.
Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for his answer. My constituent is a highly educated, high-earning civil servant who has serious care needs as a result of a bad accident about 30 years ago. His needs are assessed as health-related, meaning the NHS pays the £81,000 cost of his care. If his needs were reassessed as a social care need, he would be forced to exhaust his savings. Each year his disability is reassessed, during which his ability to work is unfairly treated with suspicion. The government says it wants to help disabled people into work. That's a good thing. My constituent is working already, but fears a huge disincentive on the horizon if his status changes. Do ministers understand his concerns?
Minister.
Yes, I definitely do understand his concerns. Our view is that disabled people should have the same chance to work, the same opportunities that everyone else takes for granted. So we want to work with disabled people to reform the system to make sure that is what they get. We'll be coming forward in the spring with a green paper on reforms to the health and disability benefit system.
The law.
Mr. Speaker, St Austell and Newquay faces high levels of economic vulnerability, with 4.4% of my constituents not in employment or education or training. Worse, 1 in 10 are either NEET or unaccounted for. So what action is the Minister taking to ensure that my constituents are supported into employment and into skills development?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think my honourable friend will very greatly welcome the youth guarantee announced in the Get Britain Working white paper. We want to make sure that every single young person gets the chance. We saw a dreadful increase in the number of neat young people over the past few years. We're getting to grips with it and tackling it.
Right, Lincolnshire.
Question number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government is looking across the piece at how the important work of our regulators supports economic growth. The pension regulator, which oversees the third largest pension system in the world, is no exception to that.
Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The then Pensions Minister, Guy Opperman, said that green-lighting defined benefit pension super funds was his greatest achievement of lockdown. The unelected Governor of the Bank of England then unhelpfully intervened and said that super funds would be a risk to financial stability. And as a result, The pensions regulator has only authorised one pension super fund to come into existence. So can the Minister be a little bit more specific and answer to us what exactly is he going to get the pensions regulator to do differently in order to support the growth mission?
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's an important question. The pension regulator does recognise its important role in supporting growth. Indeed, it has statutory duties not just to protect savers, but to minimise the impact on the growth of employers. Specifically on the issue he raises, which is an important one, and super funds do have an important role to play in making sure that we have larger pension funds that are able to invest in a wider range of assets. As he points out, on an interim basis, the pensions regulator has authorised one such fund, but will take forward measures in the pensions bill to further progress on this area.
Patrick Spence.
Question number 7, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will group this question with question number 22 with his permission. This government has run the biggest ever pension credit take-up campaign, worth around £400 on average to those eligible who receive pension credit. It also opens the door to extra support, including meaning that 1.5 million pensioners will continue to receive winter fuel payment. The modelled impact of the decision to target winter fuel payment on those who need it most does not account for the measures this government is taking to raise pension credit take-up.
Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that the cut to the winter fuel payment has hit Suffolk hard. Yes. NHS Suffolk reported that 97% of beds were occupied over the Christmas period due to a spike in cold, flu and pneumonia-like symptoms. The Knaresborough Community Centre has set up warm rooms for impacted pensioners. The only good news is that Suffolk Community Foundation have managed to raise £100,000 to support pensioners across our community impacted by the cuts. So can the Minister rise to the dispatch box and join me in paying tribute to the Suffolk Community Foundation for being there for the most vulnerable people in our society when his government wasn't?
Minister.
Well, this government and the important charity he mentions are here for the most vulnerable pensioners. That's why we are targeting the winter fuel payment on those that need it most. But it's also why we'll be uprating all of the state pension elements by over 4% this April. And while I'm here, he raises the case of the National Health Service and how important that is to older generations. But it's his party that drove the NHS into the ground over the last 14 years.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Labour-controlled Bridgewater Town Council is increasing its council tax precept by 40%. This means that pensioners in my constituency are suffering not only the loss of their winter fuel allowance, but also an enormous tax rise. So I wonder, Mr. Speaker, what advice does the Minister have for those of my constituents who don't qualify for pension credit, now face the loss of the winter fuel allowance from this government and a huge tax rise from their Labour Council?
Minister.
Well, I would encourage all pensioners to consider whether they are eligible for pension credit, but also to look for wider support can be provided via the Household Support Fund and the Warm Homes discount. But I would also say gently to the honourable member, the driving up of council tax bills is a direct result of the destruction of local government finances by the party opposite over 14 years.
Shadow Secretary of State Helen Whately.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I welcome the honourable gentleman to his place. I have a simple question for him. How many people are still waiting for their winter fuel payment?
The largest campaign to drive up pension credit take-up is now underway, and it will continue in the years ahead. What we are seeing at present is that everybody who made their claim for pension credit before the 21st of December will receive their winter fuel payment when that claim is processed.
Waitley.
The answer is he doesn't know. He doesn't know how many people are waiting for their winter fuel payment. He doesn't know how many people are stuck in the pension credit backlog. He doesn't know when they'll hear. He doesn't know who's had help from their local council. He doesn't know how many people who lost their winter fuel payment have ended up in hospital this winter. He and his department have dodged or refused to answer every single one of those questions in recent weeks. So will he commit to a full review of the winter fuel payment cut so we can get those answers?
Minister.
Well, I'll commit to fighting every day to avoid a repeat of the exercise under the last government where pensioner poverty rose by 300,000, having fallen by 1 million under the last Labour government. We will make sure that we publish details on the take of a pension credit by the end of February.
Katrina Merrick.
Question number 8, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Well, with permission, Mr Speaker, I'll answer questions 8, 18 and 23 together. We will champion disabled people and those with long-term health conditions. Our Get Britain Working plan will support many more who were failed by the last government to enter and to stay in work. We'll devolve power to local areas for a joined-up work, health and skills offer.
Katrina Murray.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I draw attention to my register of interest that prior to my election I represented disabled members on the National Executive of Unison. There are many barriers that prevent disabled people and those with long-term health conditions from not only entering but also staying in the workplace, whether it's strict and punitive approach to attendance and sickness or failure to even consider adaptations that make work possible. It's clear that employers have to be supported to make high-quality work accessible to disabled people. Therefore, can I ask my honourable friend what work he is doing to engage employers in making work a positive and constructive experience for disabled people?
Well, I commend my honourable friend on her previous work, and she's raised a very, very important point. We have launched the Keep Britain Working Review, which is being led by Sir Charlie Mayfield, the ex-chair of the John Lewis Partnership, and that's going to be looking exactly at the point she raises, how to make workplaces and the labour market more widely more inclusive, because we know and employers know that's good for businesses and good for disabled people as well.
Alex Bellinger.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As we all know, the last government was far too quick to write off people that wanted to work, that had health conditions or were suffering with disabilities. But many people in Halesowen tell me that they want to work, and with the right help and support, they can do. And that this will also give them huge physical and mental health benefits. Will the Minister tell me how this government will reset our relationship with people with disabilities who for far too long haven't been given the support they need and have instead been demonised by the party opposite?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and the manifesto that he and I fought the election on committed us to putting the views and voices of disabled people at the heart of what we do. In the Get Britain Working White Paper, we announced the establishment of a disability employment panel to enable us to work with disabled people to make sure we're providing the support that's needed and to give them the chances that he rightly calls for.
Adam Thompson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, in 2019, my close friend and constituent Jim was at his desk working as a web developer when, out of the blue, he felt a sudden pain. Jim was having a spinal stroke and he has never since been able to walk. The pain medication that Jim must now take to manage the condition limits his ability to work, but sometimes he has unpredictable bursts of productivity. However, Jim's benefit arrangements mean that work he could occasionally be able to do might result in sanctions to his benefits. What steps will the Minister be taking to ensure Jim can get back into work?
Well, he raises a very, very important point, and to some extent this has already been raised. I think the point that he's making shows how the health and disability benefits system needs to be reformed, because disabled people should have the same right to work, the same opportunities and chances as everybody else. Many disabled people, like Jim, want the chance to work, but they face barriers, including in the benefit system, that make it very difficult for them to do so, and we're determined to change the system to get over those barriers.
Sir Julian Lewis.
The Minister appreciates the important role of learning disabilities nurses in maximising the potential of people with learning disabilities. Will he therefore have a word with his Treasury colleagues about the differential effect of the raise in national insurance contributions, for which learning disabilities nurses who work directly for the NHS are exempt, but those who work for agencies that are then contracted by the NHS are not exempt? This is an anomaly, and I'd be grateful if you'd consider talking to his colleagues about it.
Well, I'm sure the honourable member will raise that concern with my appropriate colleagues, but he is absolutely right to draw attention to the value of the work of learning disability nurses, whoever their employer is, and we're determined that they should have better support in the future to enable people with learning disabilities who want to work to do so.
You're so smart.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Julie from Heatherley's experience highlights the unfairness of the employment and support allowance application process for those with progressive conditions like multiple sclerosis. She was assessed by a physiotherapist lacking any expertise in neurological disorders, thereby receiving inaccurate reports denying her vital financial support. What steps are ministers taking to ensure fair and timely support for those with progressive conditions that don't necessarily fit neatly into a box that other disabilities or conditions may do?
Minister.
We do want to improve the assessment process, and there'll be some proposals in the Green Paper about how we should do that. But if she'd like to drop me a line about the particular case that she's raised, I'll be happy to have a look at it and comment further.
Josh Babrin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For 23 years, my constituent Timothy has attended Linden Court Day Centre in Eastbourne for people with learning disabilities. Timothy's mum, who's his sole carer, has spoken about how damaging it would be if East Sussex County Council, run by the Conservatives, decided later this month to close that centre. Will the Minister join me in urging the County Council to ditch this short-sighted cut, which would leave many Eastbournians and their families without the local provision that they deserve?
Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I very much hope that people in Eastbourne will continue to get the support that, by the sound of it, has done a very good job for a very long time. I obviously don't know the details of that particular case, but it's very important not just that we maintain support, but we improve the support for disabled people in the future.
Chair of the Select Committee, Debbie Abrams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I welcome the Keep Britain working review. But according to the DWP accounts from last year, £4.2 billion of benefits were underpaid to claimants, and the most claimants that were not getting their eligible payments were disabled people. What is the government going to do to ensure that disabled people who may not be able to work get the money that they're entitled to?
Well, it's very important that disabled people do get the money they are entitled to. There will certainly always be people who are not working, and we need to make sure that there is good support for them as well. As I said a moment ago, we do have proposals about improving the assessment process that we'll want to set out in the Green Paper to come, but we're also very interested in proposals about these matters that the Select Committee may bring forward, and we'll look forward to hearing what they may be.
Sarah Dyke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. People living with disabilities in rural areas like Glastonbury and Somerton face many barriers to finding work, including lack of opportunities, poor transport and high childcare costs. So how will the Minister support individuals living in rural areas to overcome the barriers to employment and help them improve their overall quality of life?
Well, we're going to be doing a lot to improve support for disabled people to get into work and to remove the barriers, which, as she rightly says, too often are in their way. I've referred already to the Disability Employment Panel that we're setting up because we want to work alongside disabled people to make sure that we get this right, remove the barriers that are there. The Connect to Work programme is being rolled out over this year. That's going to do a lot to help. But if there are particular problems in her area that she'd like to draw to my attention, I'll be very interested to hear about them.
Shadow Minister Danny Kruger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The media reports that in number 10 they're tearing their hair out in frustration at DWP taking so long to come up with welfare reforms. We've been waiting 7 months already. Now we're told it'll be March before there's a Green Paper, and presumably no actual legislation until the end of the year at the earliest. They'll be totally bald in number 10 by then, Mr. Speaker. So let me ask the Minister, given the constant rise in the welfare bill, what is the financial cost of Labour's inactivity so far?
Minister.
Well, there's a huge cost for the inactivity bequeathed to us by the previous government. But let me just remind him, he may not have noticed, that a judicial review was lost a week before last over the previous government's handling of the work capability assessment changes. And the judge found that the consultation was frankly dishonest. It didn't tell people what the changes entailed, and it was too rushed. People didn't have a chance to give their views. We are going to do this exercise properly. We're going to set out the full details of what we propose in the Green Paper in the spring, and there'll be a very full consultation on it so that everyone has a chance to have their say.
Mr. Speaker, the answer to my question is £1.8 billion. That's the cost of Labour's economic inactivity, their failure to reform welfare since the last election. It's the same as the combined saving from cutting the winter fuel payment plus the income from taxing family farms. So let me ask the Minister this. In opposition, Labour opposed imposing conditions on people claiming incapacity benefits. Does he still rule that out? Or will the Green Paper face reality and require people to take action where they can to address the health needs that mean they're signed off work?
The Green Paper will face reality square on. We'll set out a very full set of clear policies. It'll be frank about what they entail, and we will listen to people's views in response. I think the money that he's referring to having been foregone will probably have been foregone as a result of the judicial review the week before last, because of the previous government's failures in consultation.
Mr. Strathern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Number 9, please.
Minister, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government keeps the rates of benefits, state pension and statutory pay under regular review. My honourable friend will be aware that the Secretary of State announced to Parliament on the 30th of October that, subject to parliamentary approval, parental pay will increase in line with CPI at the rate of 1.7% from April this year.
Mr. Strathern.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government's upcoming review of parental leave entitlements is a really important one, with the UK currently having some of the worst paternity leave across Europe. With recent research from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation highlighting not just the growth benefits, but the workforce involvement benefits of greater paternity leave entitlements, will the Minister meet with me and campaigners the Dad Shifts Group to make sure we're making the most of this opportunity to get people back and into work?
Minister.
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for his question? We value the vital role that fathers and partners play in caring for children and in supporting their partners, and we recognise that parental leave and pay entitlements, such as paternity leave and pay, play a key role in their ability to do this. He's right to cite the planned parental leave review. This is being led by colleagues in the Department for Business and Trade, and I, of course, will write to them on his behalf, suggesting a meeting.
David Taylor.
Question number 10, Mr. Speaker.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to answer questions 10, 11 and 24 together. To get Britain growing again, we've got to get Britain working again. And supporting employers is absolutely critical to achieving this goal. That's why last week I announced an overhaul of how the DWP helps businesses, introducing a dedicated employers team in DWP, ensuring single account managers for businesses so they don't have to have multiple conversations with different job centres, and expanding the number of training programmes tailored to employers' individual needs. Working in partnership with businesses, that is how we all go for growth.
David Tell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last Labour government reduced child poverty by nearly half, from 3 million to 1.6 million, and legislated to eradicate child poverty by 2020. Instead, under the Conservatives, the number of children in relative poverty significantly increased from 2010 to 2023. Does the Minister agree with me that working with employers to help people, particularly parents, into decent, well-paid jobs is not only essential for growing our economy, but for helping reduce poverty and child poverty too?
I absolutely agree with my honourable friend that having more parents, more lone parents and more second earners in couples in better paid jobs is critical to tackling child poverty. One of the big shifts we've seen in the nature of poverty since our last success in the last Labour government in lifting over 600,000 children out of poverty is there are more children growing up in poverty in a working household. So improving that parental employment rate is absolutely critical to driving down those numbers.
Jill Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tamundo, or Your World, is a growing independent business that recently opened its third coffee shop in Rill. Tamundo has a distinctive style, not just with their toucan motif that graces everything, including their teapots, but also with their commitment to economic growth in the local area. In partnership with the local employability service Working Denbighshire, Tamundo host work start placements for those entering or re-entering the workplace, with several graduates going on to become permanent employees. Will the Secretary of State join me in congratulating Tamundo and Working Denbighshire for this work? And does she agree with me that this is exactly the sort of partnership work that will bring fair economic growth across the UK?
Secretary of State.
Yes, I'd like to say a massive thanks to Tamundo for all the work that they are doing. And there is a lot of evidence that work placements or work experience is a really important way to encourage more people into work. Last week, I visited B&M, the fastest growing retailer in the country, to look at what they are doing with short work experience placements, which is a sort of try before you buy, both for the company and the employee. It's had a huge success rate. B&M now employ 85% of their workers through these schemes, and that's what we want to continue in future.
Melanie On.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Apprenticeships, training and reskilling in new energy technologies will be essential to delivering growth in the hard-working Humber region. Can the Secretary of State tell us more about the training programmes that she just mentioned in her opening speech that will support businesses in expanding these opportunities in Grimsby and Cleethorpes?
Secretary of State.
Yes, my honourable friend, I know, is passionate about helping more people into work. She's got youth unemployment in her constituency almost twice the national rate, and so it's essential for her constituents that we sort this out. Alongside work experience, we want to expand the number of sector-based work programmes which have tailored courses for employers, and we will also be holding summits in 3 key growth areas: construction, health and social care, and clean energy, to bring employers together with local areas so we can really go for growth.
Sir Desmond Swain.
Her ambition for 80% employment level is bound to be made more difficult by the findings of the impact assessment for the Employment's Right Bill, which foresees 5.4 billion increase in costs and 53% increase in strike action, isn't it?
Secretary of State.
Members on this side of the House are ambitious for people right across the country. We do not accept the situation we inherited from his party of the only country in the G7 whose employment rate hadn't gone back to pre-pandemic levels. Creating more good jobs in every part of the country, narrowing the employment gap between different areas is tough, but we believe it is achievable, and it's no less than the British people deserve.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to economic growth, businesses in my constituency who fully support fair pay and national insurance contributions for employees, but for whom the cumulative effect of these changes is impacting upon their ability to grow, to create employment and to invest, what does she say to those businesses?
Stay.
I say that in order to put the public finances on a secure footing, we had to take difficult decisions, and I understand that the pressures businesses are under. But they also know that if you don't balance the books, you can't grow in future. We are taking action not just to put the public finances on a secure footing, but to have a genuine programme to get Britain working again. We do not accept the situation we inherited from members opposite, when so many people were locked out, denied the right to work, and denied a good quality, good, well-paid job in every part of the country.
Mr. Jector.
Question number 13, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The CMS modernisation programme delivers increasingly effective and efficient services. The programme has transformed customer interaction with CMS, providing customers the option to make contact digitally. These efficiencies make it easier for customers to report changes and non-payment, so CMS caseworkers can focus on the collection of unpaid child maintenance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have multiple casework examples from constituents in Huntingdon who have been impacted by CMS inefficiencies. Examples include incorrectly calculated arrears with no explanation as to how the sums have been calculated, failing to verify the location of fathers who aren't providing financial support, claiming that addresses needed to be independently verified, but not conducting that verification themselves. These cases have resulted in consultatory payments from CMS for maladministration and service delays. In all instances, my constituents have been frustrated by their inability to contact CMS over the phone. In fact, in the quarter ending September 2024, 41% of calls to the child maintenance services weren't answered. What is the government doing to improve contact with CMS by telephone?
Minister.
I'm very sorry to hear of the specific examples that the honourable gentleman raises. I will take away the point about telephone and come back to him, but it may be worthwhile for us to have a broader conversation about those concerns that he's set out. So I'd be very happy to meet with him to discuss any of the specifics of the cases that he's cited.
Downing.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for that answer. In response to a number of constituents' inquiries I've had over the last couple of months, can the Minister tell me if reforms to the Child Maintenance Service will consider the paying parents' capital assets and voluntary pension payments when calculating the rate unpaid payments should be remade?
Minister.
My honourable friend raises an important point. He will be aware of the recent consultation undertaken on the future administration and operation of the Child Maintenance Service. I don't want to prejudge the decisions that will follow as a result of that, but I can tell him that we are considering the next steps at present, and I will update him and the House in due course.
Ms Jones.
14, Mr Speaker.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It is a terrible consequence of 14 years of Conservative misrule that around 4.3 million of our children are now growing up in poverty. And that's why the Child Poverty Task Force work to complete our strategy is so urgent. Task Force ministers have met 6 times and have had extensive engagement with people across the country, including external experts, local leaders, and children and their families who live in poverty.
Liz Jarvis.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. According to the End Child Poverty Coalition, in 2022 to 23, the child poverty rate in my constituency of Eastleigh after housing costs was 21%. Analysis by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation projects that child poverty in England will rise to 31.5% by 2029. Every day without action pushes more children into hardship, and I'm afraid they cannot wait for the government strategy to be published. What urgent measures will the government take now to prevent more children from growing up in poverty?
Minister.
Mr Speaker, I thank the Honourable Lady for her question, and she is absolutely right. This issue is urgent. And that was why, in the budget, the Chancellor announced the fair repayment rate that stops families having to deal with so much debt through the universal credit system, saving families over £400 a year. But we know that we have to go further, Mr Speaker, and that's why, as I mentioned, ministers are currently working very hard to bring forward our child poverty strategy.
Thank you,
Mr Speaker. Now, I know the government are working hard on developing their child poverty strategy, but what discussions is she having with Welsh Government to ensure combined efforts deliver the best for our children wherever they live?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I meet regularly with representatives of Welsh Government because whilst we believe strongly in devolution, we know that a partnership between governments is the best way to protect our children from the terrible consequences of the poverty the party opposite left them.
Kirsty Blackman.
Very much, Mr Speaker. I'm pleased that the Minister is updating us with progress. Does she believe that the poverty strategy will be announced quickly enough for there to be changes made in the spring statement, for example, or the autumn statement, or are we looking into next year? Could you give us an idea on the timeline, please?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Lady for her question. I hope she can understand from the tone of what I said that this matter is urgent. We're working quickly and we'll bring forward proposals as soon as we can.
Thank you
very much, Mr Speaker. Alarmingly, there has been talk of ruthless cuts to welfare, but this will be utterly devastating as any cuts to welfare will push more families into poverty. We won't see a reduction to child poverty by economic growth alone. It will require targeted policy action, something that both the Trussell Trust and the Joseph Rowntree Foundation agree with in their Essentials Guarantee. Does the Secretary of State have plans to change the basic rate of universal credit so it reflects the cost of life's essentials of food and household bills?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend for his question. As I've said several times, we are doing work quickly to bring forward the detail of that plan, and in fact, only last week we had a parliamentary engagement session so that colleagues across the House can be brought up to speed in detail with that work. I sat on those benches and watched for 14 years, Mr. Speaker, as the party opposite put our children into poverty, and will waste no time in getting on with dealing with this problem.
That spokesperson Steve Darling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And children who are in poverty in Torbay make up 23% of our population, but 100% of our future. Bernardo's have recently highlighted that the most powerful tool in the government box to tackle child poverty is to end the two-child cap. Only last week, the annual poverty report by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation came to the same conclusion. Minister, when will you come to the same conclusion and introduce the ending of the two-child cap?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable gentleman for his question and also for coming along to our parliamentary engagement session that we had last week, which I hope that he will agree was a productive update for everybody. As I just mentioned, I watched on those benches from opposition as various policies, including the one he mentions, were introduced, and we can all see the consequences all around us. We can't promise to do anything that we cannot pay for, but we are determined that we'll have a child poverty strategy that will work.
We now come to topicals. Moon. Tuesday.
Mr. Speaker, as my honourable friend, the Minister for Employment, likes to say, the DWP is the HR department of the government's growth mission. Yet we inherited a situation where only 1 in 6 employers has ever used a job centre to recruit. That is not good enough, which is why last week I announced 5 steps to put this right, overhauling what we do for employers, including this new dedicated employers team that has already brought more than 30 companies on board, including Swissport, Home Bargains and KFC. Soon we'll be hosting summits with businesses in key growth sectors like construction and clean energy as part of our plan to get Britain working and growing again.
Moon.
Whereas, Mr. Speaker, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly is one of 15 Workwell pilot regions that are a core element of the government's back-to-work plans to reduce economic inactivity due to ill health. I'd like to invite the Minister to visit Cornwall to see how Workwell is already making a tangible difference to helping those with health conditions to start, stay and succeed in work, and to confirm that the spending review will provide the multi-year funding necessary to sustain and expand this vital service.
I would love to come and visit. I think it's a really important programme focusing on helping keep people in work and get those who've recently left back into work as soon as possible. Workwell in his area provides advice on workplace adjustments, access to physiotherapy, employment advice and counselling, and is working closely with the voluntary sector and employers, backed by £2 million worth of funding. This, Mr. Speaker, is critical because with more than 15,000 economically inactive people in his constituency, we've got to start turning this situation around.
Secretary of State Helen Waitley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the Right Honourable Lady described herself as the HR manager for the government's growth plan. So, can Liz from HR tell me which of her colleagues should be fired for the 47,000 people added to the unemployment figures in December?
I am proud to say that I want to get Britain working again after we inherited a situation with a record 2.8 million people out of work due to health problems because they pushed the NHS onto its knees and they failed to have a proper plan to get people back into work. Our mission is to get Britain working and growing again, and that is what our plan will deliver.
Helen Waitley.
Wishful thinking is all very well, but let's talk about the facts. Those 47,000 people probably spent Christmas worrying about how they will pay the bills without a job, and they're now looking for work in an employment market decimated by Labour's jobs tax. How high does she forecast unemployment will get under her government?
Secretary of State.
if she wants to talk about the facts are we inherited a situation where we will be spending £20 billion more on working age, incapacity and disability benefits because of the mess her government made. We have inherited a situation where there's been a doubling of the number of young people out of work due to health conditions. So you're more likely to be out of work due to poor health in your 20s than in your 40s. We will have radical reforms to give people the right to work and the support they need and get the benefit bill on a sustainable footing.
To swallow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, I brought together local leaders from charities and other organisations to discuss how we can best tackle child poverty in Bracknell Forest. Can I welcome the update we've heard today on the progress of the Child Poverty Task Force and ask the Minister if she agrees community leaders are best placed to shape the support needed to tackle child poverty locally?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable friend for the question he asked, and I'm so pleased to hear about that work in Bracknell Forest. This is why the fourth part of our child poverty strategy is about local support, and I look forward to working with him and his constituents to make sure that strategy is a success.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Steve Dowling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I was pleased to hear that Labour councillors on Hull City Council had voted to condemn the shameful government's decision not to compensate WASPy women. Has this given the Minister pause for thought?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recognise the strength of feeling on this issue right across the House. We carefully considered the Ombudsman's report, but as the honourable member knows, we do not think it is fair to provide compensation costing up to £10 billion when 90% of affected pensioners knew the state pension age was rising, and the evidence shows that letters being sent earlier would have made little difference.
Danny Beales.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week marks Time to Talk Day, the Mind campaign to destigmatise talking about mental health. In light of this, will the Minister join me in calling for employers up and down the country to take part in Time to Talk Day and outline what more can be done to end mental health stigma in the workplace?
Minister.
I absolutely do, and he will know that the government has launched a Keep Britain working review led by Charlie Mayfield, the former chair of the John Lewis Partnership, who is doing precisely this, looking at how we can better support employers to help keep people in work and get them back to work. Mental health is a real concern for me, with so many young people not in education, employment or training, primarily driven by mental health problems. This is an issue we've got to sort because it's terrible for them, terrible for their future and terrible for the economy too.
Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are saving the government millions. Those are the words of Stephanie from Burgess Hill, a full-time carer for her 89-year-old mum. With carers' allowance not even covering Stephanie's petrol costs, what assessment has been made of the adequacy of carers' allowance to meet the true costs of care?
Well, the honourable member will know that we introduced the biggest increase there's ever been in the earnings threshold for the carers' allowance for those who are able to combine some work with caring. We are determined that carers should get the support that they need. There is a premium, for example, in universal credit as well. But of course, we'll keep all these matters under review.
Lee Dalton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we've heard today, the government has recently launched its Keep Britain working review. Now, developments in treatment for incurable cancers, like the one I have, mean that many of us with incurable cancer might live and live reasonably well for many years. So how, as part of the review, does the government plan to engage with people with incurable cancers to ensure that we're enabled to continue to thrive in our careers and our workplaces?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I commend the resilience of my honourable friend. And I spoke before Christmas at a report launch with the charity Working with Cancer that focuses exactly on the issue that she's raised. And she's right, the employer role here is key to supporting people with cancer to continue to thrive in work, and the Keep Britain Working Review will engage with people with lived experience as well as with employers.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's now 9 years since the Scotland Act transferred
a swathe of welfare powers to the Scottish Government. But our Minister's in a position to give a finite date by which the Scottish Government will actually have taken on all those powers and responsibilities, because that is still not the case.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The honourable gentleman will be aware that a number of benefits, as he rightly says, are currently delivered under agency agreements. It is very much for the Scottish Government to broker a conversation with us around either extending those or bringing them to an early conclusion. I'm yet to have any such conversations, but should I do so, I would be very happy to let him know.
In Lavery.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Many people with mental health conditions heavily rely on PIP so they can continue in work and remain active within their own communities. Can a minister provide advice to the many constituents of mine in Blythe and Ashton who have contacted me? They're absolutely terrified at the rumours that the government are about to scrap. There's vital support to those who have got mental health issues already.
Well, my honourable friend is right. There's been a particularly big increase in mental health problems amongst young people. And given what the last government did, I can well understand people being worried. We will continue to support people with mental health problems in the health and disability benefit system. The proposals for reform we'll bring forward in the spring will make sure the system is fit for purpose and fair on the taxpayer, and will deliver the support in work that people like my honourable friend's constituents need.
Danny Chambers.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Child Poverty Action Group has reported that there are 4.3 million children in the UK living in poverty. And Mr Speaker, in a classroom of 30, that is 9 children living in poverty. Given that the government has ruled out scrapping the two-child benefit cap, will the Minister commit to publishing measurable targets for reducing child poverty during this Parliament?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And as I've mentioned in a number of responses already, we understand the scale and seriousness of the problem that he mentions. We've already published the terms of reference for the Child Poverty Task Force, and will continue to keep the House updated as we move forward, given the seriousness of this issue.
Drew Page.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On Friday last week, we held our first NEETs and Youth Opportunities Summit in Peterborough, bringing together the College, ARU Peterborough and employers to see how we tackle our youth unemployment problem. Will the Minister commit to further working with places like Peterborough to ensure we can deliver decent apprenticeships and more opportunities for young people who need them?
Yes, I do commit to that, and I want to say I thank my honourable friend for his tireless campaigning on this issue. With almost 1,000 young people unemployed in his constituency, almost 1 in 10, I know what an important issue this is. His area is part of one of our youth guarantee trailblazers, so that every young person is earning or learning. I commit that the whole government will continue to work with him and the partners in his constituency to make sure no young person is left behind.
Joshua Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Jamie, in my constituency, is in full-time education, but is also a full-time carer. Therefore, he is not entitled to carer's allowance. Will the government say confirm that they will extend carer's allowance to those in full-time education?
Minister.
Well, the honourable gentleman raises an important point. I met a very impressive group of young people recently who've managed to navigate their way through education while also having very heavy caring responsibilities. So we're working closely with the Department for Education, Department for Health, Social Care, the Carers Trust, the Learning for Work Institute, to make sure that we are providing the support that young carers need.
MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My constituent Darren, an unpaid carer, was wrongly refused a refund for prescription charges when moving from income support to universal credit. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that there should be no gap in the support in these circumstances?
Yes, I do agree with my honourable friend, and I'm grateful to him for highlighting this particular case. We have asked the Department for Health and Social Care to review its decision in that case, hopefully with a positive outcome.
Seamus Logan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Minister will have heard several references to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation report this afternoon. That report demonstrated that not only is extreme poverty rising, but also the only part of these islands where child poverty will fall in the next 4 years is in Scotland. So is it not time that the Westminster Government took a leaf out of the Scottish Government's book?
Hear, hear.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's fair to say that we've spent a great deal of time talking to people from all parts of the United Kingdom and will continue to do so, because only a strategy that covers all of the UK will be a success.
The Pritchard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What assessment has the Minister made into the recent trends of the level of fraud within the welfare system? Every pound lost to fraud is a pound that should have gone to our schools, to our hospitals, or to the future of our residents.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank my honourable friend for his question. The assessment that I have made is of a trend that is up after 14 years of the party opposite failing to act. We lost £9.7 billion in fraud and error in the Department for Work and Pensions last year, £35 billion since the pandemic. That is too much, and that is why later today I hope colleagues will support the Fraud, Error and Recovery Bill at second reading.
In foreign.
Speaker, hundreds of farmers and other small business owners in Westborough who earn less than the minimum wage are not eligible for universal credit because of the failure of that system to take account of variability of income. Will the Minister look to put that right so we can support the people who support us?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we are committed in our manifesto to a review of universal credit, and I expect to set out shortly the details of how that review will go forward. And I'll be very happy to look at the particular case that he's raised this afternoon in the course of that review.
Darren Puffey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We all know that the best route out of poverty is through well-paid work, but for families in my constituency where a third of children grow up in poverty, low-paid and insecure jobs are a massive barrier. Can the Minister set out what work the Department's going to do to help more families back into work and to alleviate poverty for children growing up in Southampton-Itchen?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. He makes the case for our Make Work Pay reforms eloquently. It's not just about helping our economy grow, but it's also about protecting people from poverty. And in all that we do to change job centres, we want to support people into good, sustainable, well-paid work, because that's the best way out of poverty.
Sarah Olney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. A constituent came to see me last week who hadn't eaten for 4 days. Her state pension had increased in line with a triple lock, but this took her over the threshold for pension credit, which then took away her entitlement to a range of other benefits, including the winter fuel allowance. What is the government doing to ensure that people don't experience such a significant cliff edge?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the woman for raising that case with me. I'd be happy to meet with her to go into a bit more detail. That's exactly why we make sure that the pension credit threshold rises in line with the basic state pension with the triple lock.
Damien Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During COVID, assessments for personal dependence payments were either moved online or over the phone. Today, less than 5% of those assessments have returned to face-to-face. So I'd like to ask what assessment ministers have made of this change and to any links that we're seeing with the rise in fraud.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank my honourable friend for his question. In the PIP space, he's right to identify that the Department has introduced a blend of phone, video and face-to-face assessments with the aim of delivering a more efficient and user-centred service. Since telephone and video assessments have been introduced, there has been no evidence to suggest that these delivery channels are less effective than face-to-face assessments in detecting fraudulent claims. In 2023-24, PIP payment overpayments accounted for just 0.4% of DWP's overall spend on PIP, but this is something that I can assure my honourable friend we will be keeping a close eye on.
Luke Taylor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Marie Curie research has found that of the 750,000 end-of-life carers, 15% are living below the poverty line, rising to 22% a year after bereavement. Given these statistics, can I ask the Minister if he will consider extending the time that carers can claim carers' allowance from 2 months to 6 months after bereavement?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we do keep these matters under review. I hadn't looked at that particular proposal before, but if you'd like to drop me a line, I'll certainly give it a careful look.
Final question, Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I applaud the front bench for their energy in driving the Child Poverty Task Force, but every decision has consequences and costs. Could the Minister outline what the costs are of some of the processes that she's looking at changing, particularly what it would cost to lift the 2-child cap? And if she hasn't got the figure to hand, would she write to me?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Chair of the Select Committee for all of her work on this issue. I'll certainly happily engage with her through correspondence on that matter.
That completes the questions.